Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting of December 16th. I'd like to welcome all of our guests into the boardroom today. We have members of Profiling Excellence, as well as members from our panel on bullying intervention and prevention strategies and tactics, as well as our president of Kojo Institute, who is supporting the work of the panel. So welcome, everyone. And so with that, I'd like to start by reading out HWDSB's land acknowledgement. The Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the longstanding relationships with our local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. And with that, I ask you to stand for the singing of O Canada. So just before we jump into profiling excellence, I will also acknowledge that all of our executive council and our board of trustees are sporting festive sweaters tonight. We don't normally dress this way, but we are happy to celebrate. With that, I would like to invite Superintendent Sharon Stefanian to the front. No, Superintendent Bill Torrance to the front to bring forward our profiling excellence this evening.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to bring this month's Profiling Excellence recognition to both students and staff. I'd like to start with the students of the Westmount Reach for the Top National Championship team. So I call to the front Amy Wang, Marcell Matinsky, Samir Mechel, Talia Fan, Daniel Song, Phillip Darley, Neil Lin, and Nicholas Elziadeh. Staff separate. So it is my pleasure to acknowledge that during the 2018-19 season, this group of individuals became national champions for Reach for the Top. This team, for the first time ever for an HWDSB team, did qualify for the national championship and Reach for the Top through 50 years of competition. They put on a magnificent display of skill, determination, and mettle. They actually swept their preliminary 13-0, which is a feat only matched by the University of Toronto schools in 2012. This meant beating Lisgar, which is a school in Ottawa, for a second time after beating them once in the provincials, as well as finally beating UTS for the first time. Being seeded number one going into the playoffs worked well for the team as they earned a bye into the quarterfinals and were faced where they faced and handily defeated the Cobequid Educational Centre from Truro, Nova Scotia, 540 to 250. In the semifinals, they faced Eric Hamber from Vancouver and maintained the lead throughout the entire game, winning 440 to 350. In an exciting game on stage in front of all of the national teams, in the other semifinal match, they watched as Lisgar beat UTS, meaning that they would face Lisgar in the championships for yet another rematch. Although their coach could barely stand the nerves, the Westmount team managed to remain calm, positive, and focused. Their alternates in the audience helped out by sharing memes and playing inspirational music to help keep the mood light and upbeat. I see that still works. It was a very tense game. At the end, it was tied after round 1, after round 2, and going into round 3. At the end of round 3, there was what is known as a shootout. Each player on the team needed to get an answer correct without consulting their teammates in order to earn 40 points. But only if they get the 4 questions correct before the other team does. And only if they get it within 12 questions. Well, Amy got the first question. Marcell got the second question. Samir got the third. The fourth question went unanswered by either side until Lisgar responded with a volley of their own, tying up the shootout at 3 answers apiece. After 4 more questions went unanswered, it came down to the last question about a creature in Middle Eastern folklore that lives in a magic lamp. Mimicking Kwai's buzzer beater against the box back in the spring, Talia and our team buzzed in with the correct response of Genie to win the shootout and take the lead. The final round is a 90-second speed round, and that round is Westmount's specialty given their breadth and depth of knowledge. Ultimately, they won the finals 450 to 360, thus earning Westmount and Hamilton's first reach for their top national championship title. So congratulations to that. It's my pleasure now to ask another student from Westmount to join us, Chyler Sewell. Right there he is. Westmount Secondary School is extremely proud of Chyler Sewell for profiling excellence acknowledgement for recognition by the Ontario Community Newspaper Association. Chyler won the Junior Citizen Award in March for her volunteer work at Neighbor to Neighbors Hamilton Community Food Center. Her leadership is well known at Westmount and within the school community. Proud of her Anishinaabe heritage, Chyler actively finds opportunities to promote Indigenous education. This year, she has led school-wide activities promoting awareness in Orange Shirt Day and Treaties Week. She's also an ambassador to a national organization, We Matter, an Indigenous youth training and youth voice group that breaks down barriers for Indigenous youth. Chyler has participated in our Indigenous Leader Conference and has emceed our year-end Indigenous celebration, a joint collaboration between the community and the board to honor and celebrate Indigenous youth in our system. Chyler also participated in a student exchange 2 years ago where she traveled to an Inuit community on Baffin Island. Her reflections are always deep and forward-thinking about next steps for positive change. Chyler is an active member of the Eco Ninjas as well, an after-school club dedicated to supporting and saving the environment. She also plays lacrosse and has a passion for creative writing. Her post-secondary goals include studying at the University of New Brunswick with a focus on storytelling from an Indigenous point of view. To date, Chyler has won a prize for her story, Indian Tacos, as well as placing first in a writing competition sponsored by the Ontario Secondary Schools Teachers Federation, where her story on the theme of one strong woman has won first place locally and will move to compete provincially. We know that Chyler's dedication and passion will serve her well in any endeavor she pursues. On behalf of the board and on Westmount staff and students, we congratulate you. I now move on to acknowledge staff. Our first acknowledgement goes to Nathan Tidridge of Waterdown District High School. Unfortunately, Nathan's unable to join us today, but we're acknowledging that he received a Meritorious Service Cross from the Governor-General of Canada for his contributions to the community. Nathan's a member of the History Department at Waterdown District High School, an author, and does a lot of work in the field of the relationship between the Crown or the government and our Indigenous peoples. Last, I would like to ask Jay Misuk and Tara Roseberry from the Teachers Advisors of our Westmount Reach for the Top team to be acknowledged. So we've heard about the wonderful exploits of the team, and congratulations to the coaches. Just a little bit of background in terms of Reach for the Top at Westmount. The club started in 2003-04 with Mr. Misuk playing on the senior team. In that season, they qualified for the provincials for the first time, made it to the TV rounds, which at that time still existed, and were knocked out in the quarterfinals by the University of Toronto schools. He's continued in his passion. In 2004-2005, Mr. Misuk and Adam Loyonai, now one of our sponsors via Eximus Engineering, established an intermediate team at Westmount. He began co-coaching the senior team that began to regularly qualify for the provincials in the mid-2010s, generally sweeping through the preliminaries, but usually losing to that University of Toronto schools team that you beat this past year. Ms. Roseberry's also joined on to support the team as a teacher supervisor, and her contributions are greatly appreciated. Thank you to both of you. And that concludes Profiling Excellence for December. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations to tonight's recipients. You're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to leave. Our conversation will be riveting. With that, moving along through the agenda, item for approval of the agenda. Thank you, Trustee Tutt, seconded by Trustee Archer. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Declarations of conflict of interest. And I'll note that I did not receive any written notices of conflict of interest in advance to tonight's meeting. Seeing none, we'll continue. Confirmation of the minutes from November 25th and December 2nd. So I'll give you a moment to look over those. And if there's any questions. Moving along, seeing no questions or comments, on to item number 7, Human Resources report from November 26th, turning to Trustee Dees to bring forward the report.
Thank you, and through the chair. So on the last Human Resources Committee meeting, there were 3 information items. The first one is in regards to staffing changes in Human Resources, including Pam Hutton into the role of Manager of Labor Relations. And Pam is from our board and has moved up into that role. And we also were introduced to our new labor officers, Dan Rutherford, Diana Kay, and our new Senior Manager of Human Resource Services, Cindy Francis, which I believe was borrowed or stolen from Peel. So glad to see some of us getting some back from the Peel board and some good staff. So item B, we had our enrollment projections and staffing update, and I received an update on our update today, this evening from Superintendent Nunn. And as of our meeting, we were at 37 who were declared redundant. As of today, we have recalled another 10, and we are now down to 27. So that's a good move in the right direction. As we, I think, have stated in the past, that in the event of no further retirements or resignations, those teachers will be offered a long-term occasional contract for the second semester. Employee attendance. Again, we spoke about the attendance program, and as we've talked about before, the program where all employees are supported and individual circumstances are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Attendance statistics are reviewed weekly and monthly, and an early intervention model has been developed to support staff who are absent from work 5 or more consecutive days. We will continue to fully implement the strategic wellness and absence management plan and employee support and attendance management procedure. I had another update in regards to that as well. And we now have a quarterly report. So when we're looking at September to November 2018, we were at average number of days of sick days was 3.66. That's overall our employee groups. This quarter, from September to November 2019, we were down to 3.4 days, which is, the difference is a quarter of a day in the right direction, so that was good news. And with that, I will move the report.
Thank you, Trustee Deeth. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Tutt. Questions or comments to the report? Vice Chair Danko.
Thank you, and through the chair, just a question about the employee attendance support program. Just wondering how we communicate if an employee has more than 5 sick days, how we communicate what the next steps in the plan are and how long they would be monitored versus when would they be finished with the monitoring portion of our program.
To the Director.
So thank you through the chair. Just a point of clarification that I'll pass over to Superintendent Nunn to provide a further update. Our policy indicates once, in our procedure, once an employee enters 9 days, whether consecutive or not, they enter into the program. But also as an early intervention, regardless of the 9 days, if an employee enters to 5 consecutive days, then there is an early intervention where they're notified and employee wellness and support team reaches out to them to see how they can support them. In terms of how they enter the program once they reach the 9 days, I'll let Superintendent Nunn speak about what, again, reminder of those phases and how we communicate to staff around those phases.
Through you, Madam Chair. So when an employee has reached a threshold of 9 days, they would receive a letter, communication that they've entered stage 1 of the procedure. And as part of that, it would outline the levels of support within that letter available to them. We find that staff really engage with Human Resource Services as part of that at that 9-day threshold, because in order for us to understand why they may be away from work, from there they would progress. If they are away further days, they may progress further into stage 2 or stage 3 of that procedure, or there may be extenuating circumstances whereby they actually may no longer continue in the program. And again, that would be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Further questions from trustees? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving the report, that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Moving along to item number 8, Special Education Advisory Committee from November 22nd. Turning again to Trustee Deeth to bring forward the report, as this, noting this was prior to our initial board meeting, so it had the former committee membership with Trustee Deeth on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Again, there were 3 information items. The first one, we had a presentation on the A.W. Ross McDonald School. And these 2 lines do not begin to give this school the recognition or the sort of portray the amazing work that they do. The level of support and help for our students who are vision impaired is incredible. It serves all of Ontario, at least all of Ontario, and is located right here in Brantford. And it's an amazing facility, and if you get the chance, look it up, because it's incredible, and the success rate that they have with these kids and the way that they support them and help them is absolutely amazing. Item B was just a members update, and we just talked about the new initiatives aimed at bullying prevention and reporting, and just discuss questions around that. Item C was the superintendent's update, and as you can see, we just talked about staff completing special incidents portion funding files. And in regards to the after-school program for young people with autism, that a plan's being developed for that after-school program. And then that the parent guardian survey, the survey is now open, or at that time was open, and information was being sent to parents, guardians on how to access the survey. And with that, I'll move the report.
Thank you. Trustee Deeth, do I have a seconder? Trustee Paikin-Miller, thank you. Questions or comments to the report? I do have a question, so I'll put myself on the list, seeing none others. With regards to the parent-guardian survey, can I just get clarity on what types of information is being asked and collected?
So through the chair, I'll provide context. I know Superintendent Peggy Blair couldn't be here tonight, but she had another meeting. But if Peter Sovin can provide further update. Just a reminder that this came from a motion over a year and a half ago that Trustee Christine Bingham had put on the table around how do we improve communication with our parents and families and guardians with students with special needs. And we need to ask them in terms of how they want to be communicated with and the type of formats and the type of language we may be using. So I will pass over to Peter Sovin. I don't know if he does have any information, type of questions are being asked. If not, we'll provide that to trustees.
Thank you. And through the chair, as the director has indicated, that the survey is really a way in which we want to gather as much information from parents and guardians of students with special needs in order to facilitate the communication throughout the system with them in schools, with them in the way that we would communicate with them, with the way in which we communicate and facilitate the understanding of the various documents that you would go through in special education programs. I will note that Superintendent Blair did indicate that the survey is closing at the end of the week. There already have been well over 500 responses.
That's very exciting news. So we look forward to future report and with regards to the results. And thank you again, Trustee Bingham, for highlighting that issue, bringing it forward. And thank you to staff for carrying out the important work of improving communications and strengthening relationships with our families who are accessing special education in our system. So with that, seeing no further questions, all in favor of receiving the report? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Moving along to item 9, French as a Second Language Advisory Committee. I will turn to Vice Chair Danko again. This meeting took place prior to our initial meeting, so Vice Chair Danko was our representative at the time on that meeting. Now it's me. So, thank you, Vice Chair Danko.
Thank you. This is the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee report from November 27th. Trustee Galindo is actually our rep. I was the year before. So you'll enjoy the committee. There's just a couple of monitoring items for this meeting. I wasn't able to attend, obviously, but they did discuss topics for review and advice for future meetings for their work plan. And in January, they will have a staff presentation on pathways to the DELF. That's an exam that students can take at the end of high school, and it helps them get access to French programming in universities. They had a community announcement. The Canadian Parents for French representative solicited support from the committee, and they received a number of staff updates, including information on grade 1 French immersion registration, East Hamilton French immersion transitions, French immersion enrollment for this current year, and secondary course offerings for this year for French immersion. With that, I'd like to move to receive the report.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder, Trustee Miller. With that, questions, comments, Student Trustee Prozic.
Just for clarification on the governance aspect, so this had taken place prior to the December 1st board meeting, but it says on the minutes that Trustee Galindo had regrets. Does that mean Trustee Danko?
Sorry, just that was confusion on my behalf. It was Trustee Galindo that was actually the assigned trustee representative at the time, not Trustee Danko. Further questions? No. I'll just make the comment, fantastic to see Canadian Parents for French promoting Giving Tuesday. Hopefully in the future, it's Giving Tuesday to HWDSB Foundation. So put that plug in there. All in favor of receiving the report? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Turning now to the Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee on December 3rd. Bringing forward the report is Trustee Paikin-Miller.
Thank you. Through the chair. The HWDSB Human Rights and Equity Community Advisory Committee held a meeting on December the 3rd. The committee passed 2 recommended actions at the meeting. The first relates to filling vacant committee seats. On motion of GISA, the Human Rights and Equity Committee recommends that the following members be appointed to the committee for the term as noted below here. Sukhvinder Obi, parent, 1-year term, and Durar Abuzaid, Pathways to Education, organization member, 2-year term. The second action related to the need for a specific anti-Black racism procedure to address specific challenges that Black students face in the education system. The committee members are recommending to staff that they review and make amendments to the existing equity policy. Furthermore, the committee asked staff to consider developing a procedure that addresses the barriers faced by Black students. Committee members also noted that they would be available to assist staff in both the policy review and procedure development. On motion of Muna Bile, the Human Rights and Equity Committee recommends that staff review the existing equity policy and present amendments to the policy committee at the appropriate time. There was unanimous support. Meetings for the remainder of the year were established, and dates are February the 11th, April the 7th, and June the 16th. And staff member and trustee updates were provided, and with that, I move the report.
Thank you, Trustee Paikin-Miller. Looking for a seconder, Vice Chair Danko. Questions, comments to this report? Vice Chair Danko.
Thank you. Just noting through the chair that there is a recommendation that that an item come to policy. I was wondering if staff have had any time to consider when that might fall on the policy work plan or how that might come forward.
Through to the director.
I'll either look at Associate Director Peter Silvern or Trustee Heather Miller, who supports us. I'll start with Associate Director Peter Silvern first.
Thank you. And through the chair, we are going to be continuing to work through our plan for policy. At this time, we don't have it on the schedule, but we will provide that as soon as it is scheduled.
Further questions? Any further comments from other trustees? I just wanted to note with regards to item B that this certainly complements the funding that our board has recently received for a graduation coach, so that they go in sync together, which is fantastic, and that just noting that this is certainly important work. I understand that Peel School Board had taken on similar work a number of years ago, so I'm pleased to see this work going forward here at our board. So with that, all in favor of receiving the, we have one action item, but it is a motion to approve. A motion to approve the report. That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Moving along to item number 11, HWDSB Safe Schools Bullying Prevention Intervention Review Panel Update. Just before I turn over to our director to present the report, I'd also like to acknowledge that here in the audience tonight, we're also joined by President of Hamilton Community Foundation, Terry Cook, as well as other staff members from Community Foundation as well. So with that, I'll turn to Director Figueredo.
So thank you through the chair. I'm also going to put names to the people in the audience here. First of all, I want to thank Brenda Flaherty, Dr. Gary Warner, and Kika Ojo-Thompson for being here this evening. Dr. Jean Clinton couldn't, but as you'll see in the report, I always ask for 2 to 3 panel members to be present, so we're meeting that criteria this evening. So thank you. Also, Matt Goodman and Terry Cook are here this evening from the Hamilton Community Foundation because their board has decided that this engagement work is critical for our community and have provided some financial support to do the engagement work to this. So we thank them as a partner. So what trustees see in front of them on page 11-1 was the recommendation that trustees approved in October, and the trustees asked if they could have a monitoring report in the month of December. So this is what you were seeing in front of you. Again, the background is stated as clearly, and there's 3 areas I want to identify. One is the section on roles and responsibilities. You clearly see in the report on 11.1 and 11-2 that the role of the review panel is clearly identified. And I think pay close attention to that very first bullet around attentiveness of systemic issues and root causes will be a key role of the panel, as well as a critical review of the consultation findings and information, and the author of the reports. The consulting firm, Kojo Institute, who Kika Ojo-Thompson is here this evening, you can see her role is really to provide a key strategic advisor to the panel and to the director. Her team will be facilitating the consultations and helping us develop those key consultation questions and developing a communication strategy. And they will also be doing analysis of what they gather and be the report writers of this work. The advisors and experts are 4 bullets have listed there, providing the latest research that's available on bullying prevention, intervention, as well as mental health. Providing some advice that they may have on consultation questions, and the 2 universities, connected University of Waterloo with Tracy Valancourt and Dr. Deb Pepler with University of York, will be providing the online survey portion because we know that we want as many of our stakeholders, students, staff, parents, guardians, and partners to participate, and some people will want to participate if they can't in face-to-face on an online piece. So that will be facilitated through our advisors. Consultation methodology is also another area I want to highlight to trustees. And it's also important to always identify the methodology will be consultation. And when you engage in consultation, you are gathering input and feedback. And in the true spirit of consultation, you are reporting back. You're reporting back with some of your findings before your final submission of the report to trustees. And I would like to share that the panel has already met on December 11th, and they met with Student Senate because they realized the importance of having a critical student advisory group, and they reached out to students to get some advice on A, the process, and B, how they can ensure that the student voice is front and center through the entire time. But you will see in the methodology here through the two sections, 15 sessions in total are identified with the support of Kika and her firm with the panel. And they've identified out of those 15 sessions, the key groups that they've identified. One, another session with Student Senate, 5 different sessions with specific populations, student populations, to ensure that we're hearing voices of those we don't hear every day. So, for example, we identified some racialized and marginalized groups that we'll need to reach out to seek their voices. Also around community partners. As we know in our database, we have over 190 community partners who've reached out. So that's why you're seeing around 3 different sessions where community partners can come give us some advice from their critical perspective. Also, through that list, we do have community partners identify providing key support around bullying. People we work closely with, such as our public health, who support us around our Bullying Awareness Week, John Howard Society, just to name a few. And there's 5 general sessions throughout the district that will be facilitated, where we will be inviting parents, students, and staff. And we discussed that concern by having stakeholders from different groups. Will people speak up if there's different people there? And we know that's why we have someone like Kika Ujo Thompson here, because her firm is experts in engagement to making sure when we have these large sessions that there will be tables separated so students can be together and speak freely, so parents can come together and speak freely, or staff can be at certain tables and speak freely. We've also identified, it says 5 sessions total. It should actually say 5 sessions minimum. There'll be some smaller sessions that our panel will be engaging with, because in the report approved by trustees October 28th, we identified that there were some key groups we wanted to make sure existing structures that were engaged as well. A session with our union partners. You'll see that there'll be 3 sessions with different management groups, including our board of trustees. When we say management groups, we're speaking about also not our trustees, but our principals association, our principals and vice principals who have a huge responsibility in the execution of bullying prevention intervention. Also, a session with our key advisory groups and board committees, from SEAC to PIC to the 5 community advisory committees we have, and there'll be a session with those key structures as well. And I think it's important that at the very bottom of the page, it identifies that the reason we're saying 5 minimum is that once you begin to engage in consultation, the true spirit of engagement, it is, as I'm reminded by many people, an iterative process, and there'll be some flexibility. But the flexibility, what we want to ensure that there's also some consistency. When we start to engage, we might hear there's other voices that we haven't heard. So the panel will have that flexibility to engage in some further work. So that section shouldn't say 5 sessions total, it should say 5 sessions minimum. And last but not least is the timelines. And as we work through this iterative process, we've met 4 times already, and we're seeing that these timelines, again, to do this right, I've learned, a key mentor said to me, there's a great African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we want to go together with the panel, with our advisors, with our consulting firm. And so we're looking at these timelines, and I know trustees have identified before, we're still aiming for May 2020, but what that might look like, there might be different versions of an interim report and a final report, but we're still working through that process. So through the chair, that's the report, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Director. Turning to Vice Chair Dango.
Thank you, and thank you to the Director for the update and to our panel members for joining us tonight and our community partners. My questions are around timelines. So I appreciate that we have set fairly aggressive timelines with the intent of trying to do something sooner rather than later and to show the community that we're taking action. But through the chair, do we feel that this is a realistic timeline? And I heard that with this being an iterative process, there needs to be some flexibility. We may identify groups that need to be consulted. There needs to be an opportunity to report back to the community as part of this process and as this process unfolds. So is a final report realistic for May 2020, or would it be more appropriate perhaps to extend the timeline to get to the final report?
Director.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Vice Chair Don Danko, for your question. In our initial meetings, what was discussed, and then is that this might be a challenge May to have the final report, and why. It takes time to engage in so many sessions and then to analyze and summarize the findings. And from the expertise that I've learned, that what we would recommend would be to have a commitment in May, probably around the first findings, what we would call a consultation report. What's from the face-to-face and online that we could commit to a consultation report by the end of the May. And the suggestion then would be then to feed it back to people. Does it capture what we believe, the voices of the community, and also to run it by our advisors who might provide some expertise in some of the recommendations. And then to take that away and then take the summer to do the final report and then bring the final report to trustees in September. But the desire would still then to be to bring what I would call an interim or a consultation report by the end of the May, and then realistically September with the final report.
Thank you. And through the chair, I feel more comfortable with extending it to September to have a final report, but I do think it's important that we do have that check-in and some level of reporting to trustees in May. So at the appropriate time, after questions have been answered, I'd be happy to move that we adjust the timeline. My second question is around, and it's been addressed or acknowledged, that when we're doing facilitation, we need to have safe spaces where people feel they can speak and be heard. And you acknowledge the concern, will people speak up if we have mixed groups? And I'm thinking of the general sessions where we're expecting staff, students, families, all to attend one session. So I was hoping to hear a little bit more about how we, one, could communicate that within those sessions, there will be opportunities to join groups of like people, for lack of a better phrase, that there will be opportunities to share in smaller groups, because my concern would be that staff versus student perspectives may be a little bit challenging to capture in one general session. And I appreciate that we have an expert on facilitation here, but I would like to know a little bit more, if possible, about how that would work.
Director?
So through the chair, I'll do my best. I will be sharing on December 13th, which is Friday, the review panel and consulting firm and advisors met, and this concern came up, and I believe it also came up through the Student Senate piece. We are meeting again Thursday, December 19th, and what we're potentially proposing is, out of those 5 sessions, should we A, have one session that's directly focused on in-school staffing, and then B, look at the other 4 sessions, and then clearly communicate not only the dates, but what the process will look like. Our communication plan is coming to the meeting on December 19th. And then as we communicate in January and we start to execute those tactics, we'll have to be clear in terms of what and how those facilitations will unfold. So thank you for that reminder, because it'll be important for people to know if they're coming to the sessions that might have multiple stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you, and we will return to you at the appropriate time. I have trustees Deeth, Bingham, and student trustee Prozik.
Thank you, and through the chair. My first is a comment, and please do not forget our rural communities and make sure that they are captured. I know that we are seeing down here, so I guess with that a question, under sessions involving panel members and the Kojo Institute, bullet 3, sessions with community partners, and we've listed Mountain, Lower City, Inner and East, and Lower City West. So I'm just wondering if the rural communities are being captured in that.
Director?
So through the chair, so we will take that away, but I will answer the first part, that our Rural Advisory Committee is one group that we will be reaching out to, but we'll take your feedback in terms of strategic locations. Where will they be? So we'll take that consideration away, because we do have facilities also in those rural areas that could be capitalized on. So thank you for that feedback.
Absolutely, thank you. Because bullying may look similar out there, but it also may look very different. So, and the other question I ask is, I know that I am getting calls already about people wanting to take steps or to do something in the meantime. Next September deadline can seem like a long way away to those that are looking for some immediate change. I know we've already started doing some things, so I'm just wondering if we are going to be ourselves rolling some things out, or even working with some of those stakeholders, and I'll mention Voices Against Bullying, if there's an opportunity for them perhaps to put some things in place or to do, they've been talking about workshops and presentations and that kind of thing. I've been sort of saying hold, like we want to make sure that we're all working together. But I'm just wondering if there is a chance for them to maybe initiate some things that will align with what we're doing.
Director.
Thank you, Trustee Deeth, for that question. You're absolutely right. There's been an increase of partners requesting strategies to implement. So our balance is reminding people of our process, that if they're a partner to submit a partnership application. And also we know that we have instituted some things that we're currently doing. Our challenge will be to make sure that we vet things appropriately, to make sure they're solid, they're sounded in research. And there's also a variety of people who are coming to provide services without cost, and then there are people who are requesting to provide services with costs. So I would, at this point, have been recommending people to reach out to our community engagement department, to Amber or Quinn, to put them on the list, and we are processing them, not as quickly as maybe we'd like, because there's quite a few. We also want to make sure we vet them properly to make sure that they're aligned to some of the recommendations. My fear sometimes could be a knee-jerk reaction with well-intended organizations, but that might not align with maybe what the community voice is and what the research is saying is best practice.
Thank you. And my final question is in regards to the online survey questions, as they're developed, will they be coming back to trustees before they're being released?
So I'll turn that over to the director, but I will remind trustees that we are arm's length. So we had just a friendly reminder with that was our own direction. I'll turn that to the director to provide a response.
So through the chair, thank you for that reminder. My commitment was also to come back in March with an update of where we are in the process. But to the questions, the consulting firm with the panel will be developing the face-to-face questions, and our expectation is the face-to-face questions that are being developed will then be reflected in the online. But to come back for trustees for approval, that wasn't the intent, but it can come in March as an update in terms of where we are in the process.
Does that help?
So, I mean, just my concern is that if there's going to be calls, we're going to get them, right? If there's something that people, something about one of the questions that maybe is of concern, so it would be nice to have eyes on those questions before they're released. So not that we have to maybe approve them, but I think just that we get an opportunity to see them. So, thank you.
Director.
So through the chair, what I will do as we unroll in our communication tactics as we're executing, I will make sure the trustees get all that information updated, including once the questions are finalized, you're aware of the type of questions that will be asked, so you're in an informed position.
Thank you. Trustee Bingham.
Two questions, now that I've remembered them because I didn't have my pen to write them down. One is around when we are talking about the committees and the legislative committees that we have. Really want to know whether First Nation, Métis, Inuit, FNMI committee is going to be there, because I'm already having Indigenous families say, how are we going to be taking care of our kids? How are we going to keep them safe in school as well? And I want to make sure that their voices are captured.
Director.
So thank you to the chair. Yes, they'll be included, but also we'll also be reaching out to our Indigenous community partners who are involved. And I think it's really important that Trustee Bingham, you flagged an important piece that we'll have to also look at engagement in terms of how we might define engagement with some of our groups, especially our Indigenous community. We'll have to be sensitive in terms of what might be the best process or location to engage with them as well. But yes, they will absolutely be included.
And the second one basically is around what Trustee Deeth was saying as well, and the possible motion coming. It was very recently that we've actually struck the panel here. We approved of it, and all of a sudden we're talking about extending it. Is there... I'm more concerned about the families that are out there going, what in the world, because we want something done now. Like, what is going on now? We keep extending this, and we knew we might end everything. Can it be clear, concise, layman's terms for families so that they understand why we would even consider having this extended at such the beginning of the process? We haven't even gotten somewhere. Usually you would extend something toward the end and that was what we talked about before. But how is it that they can understand that we would even be thinking about extending it already?
So just before I turn to the director, And just a reminder, that was a discussion around this table the night that we approved. But Director, if you could offer background as to why the request is coming forward to extend the timeline, and if you could also offer for those families who are wanting to see immediate change, if we have revelations coming out of the engagement process, will we be waiting until September to act on that? If you can provide clarification what that process will be as well. Thank you.
So thank you through the chair. So for Trustee Bingham's question, again, if approved by the board, the concern about how do we communicate to our families why there may be an extension. I think it's important at the beginning in January we come out that we still expect in January we'll begin our engagement sessions. It's not to delay the beginning of our engagement sessions, but as we started drawing the list and realized how many sessions we were going to do, and that if the process in true engagement, you might find more groups that you meet to seek, it might take longer. That's why I think from the panel's perspective was that if we should commit to May to have at least a consultation report, which is that sort of interim report, because you don't want to put a final report in front of trustees and the community say, oh, we didn't get a chance to sort of review whether that actually captured what we were stating and recommending. By having a consultation report, we can go back to the community and state, this is what we're proposing. We believe it captures what we've heard. Any final thoughts? That's why we believe in that sort of true engagement process. You shouldn't just ask for input and then put a report and say final. You should ask for input, report back to the people you've engaged with, and then bring a final report to make sure there's any final revisions. But we'll make sure that's sort of clear when we start communicating the process. And then to Chair's question around if through the process there is a clear recommendation that would provide some key learning for staff that we're hearing as a theme, do we wait till May or September to find out, or does the panel provide that advice to me as the director to say, we're seeing a theme emerge that's sort of relevant, it's timely, we'd like to pass this on to you to make sure that you can be responsive right now. That's what I would expect from the panel, and then you would expect for me to act on. And if there are those themes, I think if there's a theme, then I would provide an update to trustees.
Thank you. Further questions, Trustee Bingham? Student Trustee Prozic, and then I have Trustee Miller, and then Trustee Mulholland.
Thanks. And through the chair, I'd just like to thank all the panel members for coming out to visit us for our December 11th Student Senate meeting. We had a very engaging session and some great feedback was given on how to collect student voice through our student senators. So thank you for that. I just have a couple questions regarding the general sessions that combine parents, students, staff, and community members in each family of schools. So just my first question is, are these sessions open to all members of these families of schools?
To be determined. We put 5 families of schools just because of geographic locations, but we know that if you limit one session to one family of schools, that date might not work for them. So there'll be some flexibility that so if people know of the 5 sessions that are available, they could attend one. It might just encourage them to attend the one in their family, just so, and we would, as I've learned from Kika, we would have some kind of registration so we could sort of have an understanding of how many people we're expecting to come so we could prepare and facilitate appropriately.
Further questions?
So just to clarify then, this will be available to any representatives or any community members or any students or any staff interested in attending these sessions?
Director?
Yes, we'll be clear of who the stakeholder group is for those 5 sessions. Right now you see students, staff, or parents and guardians. So yes, that's correct.
Then my next question would be, do we have a plan on how these sessions will be communicated to those key stakeholder groups for these general sessions? Just starting now would be great, just as people do need to manage their schedules and ensure that we can get the most attendance possible with these general sessions.
Director?
So through the chair, I missed the first part, but I think it was how will these sessions be communicated to the general public? So we're reviewing on December 19th the communication plan. And then the plan will be executed by our communication department. We also know that we have to be very considerate of the different languages that our communication needs to be shared, just as we learned with the special education notice of special education consultation, or we had to communicate in 7 different languages. So we will be communicating once we finalize December 19th, but most likely in early January is when we'll be starting to communicate the dates. But you're right, what your feedback is, make sure there's multiple times so people can plan and be forewarned of when the dates are coming.
Does that conclude your questions?
Yeah, with that practically read my mind about the languages of communication. I would just like to end off by saying I really see a lot of value in these general sessions, especially combining all these key stakeholder groups can provide a lot of learning for all of them. So I can't wait to see what comes of those.
Thank you. Trustee Miller.
Thank you. And through the chair, you actually just answered my first question. I was going to inquire as to how we were going to get our ESL populations, as well as, just general populations with dealing with disability, with special needs, with special education as well. So thank you for that clarification. I want to state that I'm very excited to see what this research and what this community engagement brings forward. Unfortunately, I also want to communicate that what we have been hearing, or at least that what I have been hearing from my community of schools is extremely concerning, because as excited as I am about what we're talking about here and what we're working on here, I've had many a parent now and student come to me and describe that they don't feel safe in our schools. They're very concerned with students bringing weapons, that has now become a very new and real normal for them, and that it is, creating a very anxious, very unsettled school experience in their day-to-day life, and very much even a normal part of their day-to-day life. So I'm looking forward to see what these discussions are going to be coming out of this research. I am wondering, in the vein of what I've just said, if we could open up perhaps some of the language in the research collection to include just violence, to not, I know that the core and the crux of the work here is around bullying and around, some of the stigmatization that comes with some of our school populations, but I'm personally seeing a bit of a crest happening outside in the discussions, and I would feel so inclined as to say that my fellow trustees are probably hearing very similar stories. And that's not to discredit at all or undermine the very urgent issue of bullying as a general issue. But I'm wondering if maybe when we are working with developing these surveys, if there would be some room to include just kind of an overall temperature check, particularly at the student level, with checking how our students are feeling around just occurrences of violence, because many students have told me, I'm not being bullied, but I don't feel safe at school. We all know who brings guns, we all know who has knives, and I've asked them, okay, so did you talk to anybody? Did you tell your admin team? No one's listening to me. I didn't even bother. All the students know, but no one else is listening. And I know our admin teams, I know our staff have been burdened and are deeply connected to this work. I've seen such amazing work from every person in this room. It's unfortunately taken over our fall season, but so I know the will is here, and I know the language is here, and I know the want is here. But I'm wondering if we could make a little bit of space at the table to help our students articulate stuff that might not necessarily fit under the bullying topic or heading, but can still convey what they are taking on every single day. I know that was a very long-winded question, but if there could be even if it's just a general kind of check-in, if there could be some room to there, and I don't know if that needs to be.
I think
thing.
I think we're hearing the question. So with that, and I mean, we are here today for a specific there was a specific incident that drove the panel, and that's, the tragedy that happened at Churchill. So it wouldn't, that said, I'm going to pass it over to the director, but I think it's important for anyone who's either watching or here in the audience to note that we do take these issues seriously. We are encouraging reporting. We've seen an increase in reporting, and that's important to note, that these conversations are coming forward because we're asking the questions as well, that this is a profound discussion happening right now in our community. So we are going to be receiving, I guess there's heightened awareness, heightened feedback coming in. To that, I mean, with many of the trustees around this table, I've been working with many of you, including yourself, where we do hear of instances of bullying and violence, and there is one of the main questions that we are certainly, or I guess challenges that we're confronted with is that individuals do not want to report. And so that is something that I understand staff are looking at, but I'll turn to the director.
So thank you through the chair. So thank you, Trustee Miller. There are two things in there. So I think that and I'm glad the panel's here this evening, and Kiko as well, to hear the comments of trustees. That's why I invited them. Your first part around the violence, I think that's an important topic. And when you think about bullying, physical bullying is one of the categories. So definitely it can be captured in that. When we think about cyberbullying, social bullying, physical bullying is alive and real for some students. But I think the second piece, I think trustees have experienced around what we're working with, especially our community partners and our police services. There has been, since our Bullying Awareness Week and our sort of reminder of students of the tools there's been more reporting, and there has been more reporting, and honestly, of students who might have weapons. And you've seen a response, and I think I'll be very clear with our stance, and you're witnessing it because you are sitting at expulsion hearings and making decisions, that we have discussed the importance of us to take a stand that when we are aware of students with a weapon and it's reported, whether they communicate any intent to use it or threaten anyone or actually do try to cause harm, if they are in possession of it, that it's an automatic 20-day pending, and then the 5-day inquiry, the principal kicks in so we can understand a bit more. Because we've heard from students and some parents that there needs to be a consistent sort of approach of how we're handling when we become aware that there is a student, for whatever reason, with a weapon, then sort of explore what's happened. So you're seeing that. And we'll continue to sort of take that stand, but we definitely will sort of take your feedback around how we ensure that the violent piece around physical bullying is that people completely understand the different forms of bullying when we're engaging in people and what it may sound like and look like, so it's captured. Because if we just use the broad term bullying, people are going to have their own interpretations. So it'll be very clear that we articulate what the different forms will exist, what they may look like. So thank you.
Okay. Trustee Mulholland no longer has a question. No. Further questions or comments to the report? Trustee Archer.
Thank you. My question is, we're talking about students. Is the committee panel prepared to hear from adults too, not just the students? Thank you.
If you can please, Director, walk us through some of how our parents would get engaged according to, I guess, the recommended, or I guess the panel's planned schedule.
So thank you through the chair. So to Kathy, Trustee Archer's question, important as students is, as important the student population is, we have to hear the voice of adults. So we will be scheduling sessions with parents, guardians, and also the adults. Our staff in schools are going to be a key voice as well. And also around our adults who we work with, who are the community partners, they also want to provide some insight. So we will definitely be hearing the adults, but we know that our main clients are students, and we have to hear the voice of students with their parents and guardians, because they are a key stakeholder for us.
Further questions, Trustee Archer? Okay. Other questions or comments from trustees? I will turn back to Trustee Danko to make a motion.
Thank you through the chair. Just to keep it simple, I would like to, if you look under background, we have our previous motion where the Director of Education, the feedback and recommendations from the panel would be shared with the board no later than May 31st, 2020. I would like to change that to September 30th, 2020. If it's okay, I can speak to that once I have a seconder.
Looking for a seconder. Trustee Buck, please speak to your motion.
Thank you. And so that's the simplified version, is just changing the date in the motion. What I'm looking for is that our timeline would be amended, as the director suggested, so that we would still receive results from the initial consultations in May, and that would be in the form of an interim report. But then, so that we are engaging the community in authentic consultation and feeding back information to them to make sure that the panel has time to ensure that they've heard the messages clearly from the community, and that they have time to truly analyze and bring forward recommendations. I think this is a realistic timeline, and I recognize what Trustee Bingham had to say. Would there be concerns if we're already proposing a delay? So I'll just remind trustees that we passed early in October the motion that we would create this panel. There was then some time involved in determining what the panel would look like and what the supports would look like, so there was a bit of a delay there. And then the review panel scope is to determine how they're going to do this work. We set a timeline before they established that. So now that we have an idea of how comprehensive the consultation is going to be, I think it is only fair to build in some flexibility for this iterative, flexible process to ensure that, one, the community starts the consultation with a clear expectation of outcomes. I would hate to say that the panel has a May 2020 deadline for a final report. We had acknowledged when we set that we could extend beyond May 2020, but I would hate for the community to have that in their head and then be disappointed. So I think we want to be realistic. We want this to be a timeline that the panel can actually achieve and achieve it while doing that comprehensive consultation, review of the research, and really working towards recommendations that we can implement as a community. So I want to recognize that it was a little delay in getting the panel set, that we need to respect that it is within their scope to establish the work, and now that we've heard the work, I think this is a realistic timeline, and I want to make sure the community is aware of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Danko. Speakers to the motion, Trustee Bingham.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this. It wasn't that I'm concerned about the extension. I'm concerned that people won't understand that we've given that extension this early in the process. Because normally you would get to a certain point and then say, we're not really ready for it, can we get an extension for it? So it's just that it is very early in the process, and that was my concern, people having to understand why we would do it so quickly.
Thank you, Trustee Bingham, and I think the director highlighted earlier, I mean, we have professionals with us, and they did go through the entire timeline, and that is where they understand the scope of their work and why they would be asking for additional time. But thank you, because it is important that we're clear to our communities. Do we have other speakers to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the, actually, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to read out because it will be the entire report. I guess that we're, no. So the motion is that to amend the previous approved motion from October, the amendment is to change the date of the final report from May to September 30th, 2020. No, to no later than September 30th, 2020. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, that is Trustees Archer, Bingham. Okay, sorry, can you raise your hands, all in favor? Trustees Archer, Bingham, Pagan-Miller, Mulholland, Dango, Johnstone, Buck, Student Trustee Prozic, Student Trustee Meddy, and Student Trustee Deeth. Those against? That is Trustees Miller and Tutt. The motion passes. So with that, to the amended main motion, saw no further comments. I am going to add myself to the speakers list just to state that that I'm encouraged by the work going forward. I was very pleased to see the amount of work and thought and detail that went into the report that has come forward to trustees tonight. I think that with the amendment, it puts together a balance from what we have been hearing from our communities. We have, on one hand, a very strong desire to have an authentic and highly engaging consultation process. And on the other hand, we are hearing from those in the community that want changes made today. And I think that what we're hearing in the, I guess, the pathway that we've put forward draws a perfect balance between those. What we've heard from staff is that they will be introducing changes immediately, that we will not be waiting for a final report to come forward. At the same time, we want to ensure that the community is given that opportunity to provide meaningful feedback. So with that, I do have confidence in the direction that we have given tonight to move forward on this very important issue that we're facing here in our community, and quite frankly, that the rest of Ontario and communities across Canada are watching eagerly to see what learnings we have here in Hamilton, as they will be applied. They will be applied near and far by communities. So with that, all in favor of proceeding with the report? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. So with that, thank you, trustees, and thank you to our audience members tonight. With that, we're moving on to item 12, HW Student Transportation Report, Bell Time Study. And that is myself that is bringing forward the report. So I'm going to turn the chair over to Vice Chair Danko.
And thank you. Madam Chair, would you like to bring forward item number 12?
Thank you, Trustee Danko, or Chair Danko. With that, governance, HWSTS Governance Committee met last week. During that meeting, we did arrive at a long worked upon and anticipated agreement with regards to the parameters and guiding principles of the Bell Time Study. This, I guess, represents significant process made between both boards to arrive at this agreement. With the background, and I'll turn this over to the director to provide a more fulsome report, but with that, what this does is it gives specific criteria to the Bus Transportation Consortium in order to calculate bell times for all of our schools across the public school board as well as the Catholic school board. There is believe that we can reduce our buses or we can realize a reduction of at least 40 buses, and that would effectively resolve our bus driver shortage here in Hamilton for September 2020. The exact details of if this report is passed tonight, just noting page 12-3 does go into, in the middle, that report does highlight the earliest start time and end time of both elementary and secondary schools for both school boards. And it's noted that the exact changes of which schools would have a change and which schools would not be changing, would be coming forward in the new year. The study is expected to be completed in January and brought forward to both boards beginning to mid-February. So with that, I will turn this over to the director.
Mr. Director?
Thank you through you, Chair. I believe Trustee Johnson has captured most of it. I just want to remind trustees again that the challenge that we've had the last 3.5 years around the number of students who are late for school because of our driver shortage and the number of buses that are late. And we've taken many attempts to try to remedy that through recruitment, but they have not been successful. So coming into this year, the Transportation Governance Committee, under the leadership of Associate Director Stacy Zucker, who was unable to be here today and honoring her vacation week that she had this week, she asked if she should change it. I said no, that she's earned that vacation week and she's to be on vacation. And she's done all the heavy work leading up to this on our behalf. But two strategies. One was the policy, and both boards decided, and our trustees decided that no policy is our commitment to our community. If we only make minor changes, then we'll continue to provide this service. What's another approach? So the other approach is the efficiency study. As you can see here, 316 routes for both boards. One route could contain of 2 or 3 runs, as some of you, as I know Trustee Archer looking at me knows that, in terms of, so when one route is late, that could be 2 to 3 runs that are late, and it also could be another 2 to 3 runs, especially if a bus driver is picking up someone else's route. We also know that based on the first page, we're identifying that our contract with our current providers expire at the end of September 2021 school year. So next school year is our last year with the provider, and based on what we're seeing across the province, new contracts are coming in around a 30% increase. So if you look under staff observations, to try to really address this short-term and long-term is really through the bell time study. Guiding principles were put in place, and you can see that number one, it's to reduce the impact on instructional time, to make sure students are in class on time, which has been a challenge in some of our communities last 3 years. Minimize the change in bell times where possible, minimize the range of secondary schools. As we looked at examples, if one secondary school finished 90 minutes earlier than another, there would be some potential impact on extracurricular athletics and coordinating that. Trying to minimize congestion in geographic areas. And also, how do we state our commitment to communicate to our communities as soon as possible? We expect to have the bell times, the actual school-by-school analysis back to transportation governance by the end of January for final review to make sure they've aligned to those guiding principles, and then to communicate by mid-February any changes. If you do look at the 12-3, this report, if you look at the first 2 columns, that is HWDSB. What's highlighted there are the parameters that the transportation governance discussed and agreed to bring to both boards. As we're bringing this here tonight, I know Pat Daly and Director Dave Hansen is bringing this report to their Board of Trustees tomorrow evening. So if you look at our current elementary and what we're proposing, that there could be elementary schools starting 8:10 or starting as late as 9:30, and that we've given parameters that an elementary school could end as early as 2:30 or end as late as 3:50. And you can see the changes in secondary. Why is this critical? It allows one bus driver or one bus to add more runs to a route, and hence how you can eliminate 40 buses. You can see that the Catholic boards, I won't speak to them, but they gave very similar ranges, because we know for this to work, for the efficiency to happen, both boards have to be engaged in this. And so this is what we're presenting here tonight. And as trustees may be aware, we have piloted 2 schools. We have actually started 2 schools at 9:30 start this year, Shannon-Coustashen, I believe. And I'm going to get the Spring Valley, which is the old Queen Ranger School, start at 9:30. We also know that we'll have to work with our community partners, our before and after school care, our daycares, so they'll have to adjust their times to adjust to our bell times. So this is what we're providing here this evening for trustees to approve. And then our commitment is in February, we will communicate to our trustees and to our communities the actual bell times for each school so they can make, so those who have to change have plenty of time to make changes for their family situation. Back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Would you like to add anything else, Chair Johnstone?
No, that is everything at this time.
Okay, I'll look to trustees for questions or comments. Trustee Archer?
How many routes do you think, are you expecting one driver to? Any idea?
Mr. Director?
Through the chair, I don't have that answer with me tonight, Trustee Archer. I just know from our transportation manager said that many routes are 2 runs right now, and that with some of this flexibility in changing times, one route could add another run, so they could do up to 3 runs is what I'm hearing.
Any further questions, Trustee Archer? No? Further questions from trustees? Trustee Deeth?
Yeah, through the chair, I'm just looking at our current earliest dismissals, or sorry, our current latest dismissal is for secondary is 3:15, and our optimal latest dismissal, is that what's suggested, is 3 o'clock. So we're moving it by 15 minutes, is that correct?
Mr. Director?
Am I reading this right?
So through the chair, this one was slightly adjusted because of the guiding principle of both boards were concerned that they had a secondary school potentially ending at 3:50 and one ending at 2:30, the impact on extracurriculars. So that range was changed, but what you will see for secondary schools, based on some of the research, is that you'll likely see some of the secondary schools, or if not most, start maybe a little later than what they typically are. So our latest was 9:10 currently, and we're pushing that some of our secondary schools may be in that sort of later start time range based on what we've been looking at the research. But to your question, Trustee Deeth, the end time range was reduced a bit because of the potential impact on athletics and extracurricular.
Trustee Deeth?
Yeah, so sorry, so just the way I'm reading this is I understand that we've increased the potential start time from 9:10 to 9:30, but we've decreased the latest dismissal time from 3:15 to 3. So I'm just wondering if a school starts at 9:30, let's say, which is the latest it would start, what would that school finish at?
Mr. Director?
So through the chair, it would be around 3, because remember, we have certain schools might have 4 period days or 5 period days in high school, and also what the length of their lunch break may be. That's where it does range. So again, these will be brought back to transportation governments in January to look at school by school situation.
Trustee Deeth?
Okay, yeah, so I was just trying to understand how that we have a later start time but an earlier finish time. So just trying to figure out how those match up. But you say that if we are at our latest dismissal at 3:15, that school will end, or sorry, our latest arrival time of 9:30, then that school will finish by 3, correct?
When given those parameters, that's what the transportation said based on the schools we have, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Deeth. Any further questions? Trustee Tutt?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Through you to the director, my question essentially, just so I got it right, I'm gonna look at start times. So I'm going the other way. When we actually see that report with specific schools, am I to understand that essentially this is a bit of a range here from 8:10 to 9:30 that we'll see. So potentially there could be some schools that start at 9, or is this an either or 8:10 or 9:30 a.m.?
Mr. Director?
Through the chair, thank you. That is a range that no earlier than 8:10, but no later than 9:30, and it could be anywhere in between.
Any further questions? No? Any other trustees with questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll add myself to the list. We are looking to approve the guiding principles as well as the bell time parameters tonight. So with the guiding principles, number 4 says minimize congestion in close geographic areas. Having said that, if we wanted to share buses with our coterminous board, many schools are next door to one another. So are we limiting the ability to share buses with the coterminous board, and like to actually share a run with the coterminous board with that guiding principle, Mr. Director?
So through the chair, thank you, Trustee Danko. You're correct. One of the things we've learned through efficiencies is if we have a public school and Catholic school across the street and they have a 45-minute difference, that limits the piece. So it was brought forward that if we can look at, if will both schools have to be exactly at 8:30, or is there a window of, because sometimes a 5-10 minute window can address congestion. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That clarifies that further. And I think my other question was answered. In terms of the windows that are listed under the bell time parameters, can you just explain those again? So the earliest arrival window for secondary minus 30 minutes, does that mean if a current secondary school starts at 8:30, then they could start as early as 8 o'clock? I'm just not sure I'm clear on that.
So through the chair, yes, they asked for flexibility either way, but we also indicated we knew some of the research about starting later would be better for our students. So again, we're going to use those. We've given them those guiding principles to come back with when they actually give us the actual schools at transportation governance. So it could be by this, but we could actually might say no, because that sort of contravenes the guiding principle, but we want to see how efficient they can be to eliminate 40 buses. Again, guiding principles are there to guide their work, and sometimes there might be outliers from the guiding principles, but that's why we thought it was important at transportation governance. It was actually both chairs of the board who requested that these guiding principles be front and center before the actual bells for each school are shared with the Transportation Governance Committee.
Thank you. So just to clarify, for example, if the current or the optimal earliest start time is 8 a.m. for secondary school, and the AM earliest arrival window is minus 30 minutes, that doesn't mean we're suggesting a high school would start at 7:30, correct? No, okay. Just making sure.
So thank you for that. Thank you for the clarity. Absolutely not. It means it can't be any earlier than 8 a.m. Thank you.
Okay, I have someone going into secondary, and that would be a challenge, knowing that they also often have to take HSR buses to secondary, and sometimes 2 buses. I know that our students are already out there very, very early in the morning. Thank you. So are there any further questions? Sorry. Trustee Felix Miller.
Thank you, and through the chair. If I could just get some clarity, is there a reason, or if you could just maybe provide some background as to why the new contracts have gone up about 30%? For the contracts being done with these transportation companies?
Mr. Director?
That might not be specific for you, but yeah.
Yes, in general, I'll speak in general. We know, people have said salaries for bus drivers are something they know. One of the ways to recruit drivers is for companies to pay them a higher salary. 2, the maintenance of their fleet, of their vehicles. And in some of these RFPs too, there are some requests for new technology on some of the buses. For example, in some consortiums, they have a GPS as requirement in all buses to try to improve communication. So those are sort of the general themes. And some of them also were contracts that were for a long duration, and people did extend them. And then under these new contracts, those are sort of the 3 things I hear again around salaries, maintenance of fleet, cost of fuel, and also around technology enhancements in some of the vehicles.
Trustee Miller?
Thank you. So is it fair to assume that a lot of our boards are dealing with sort of outdated contracts, and then now that they're coming up for renewal, cost of living, all the general expenses have increased?
So through the
Mr.
chair, yeah, so we were fortunate, we extended our contract a few years ago instead of going through a new RFP, and our providers agreed to it. But then with the cost of living, minimum wage increase, they have been saying that they are struggling, and one of the reasons they believe they're struggling to recruit people. But through our initial review, if we, as a board, kept our current bell times and we project the budget assumption of a 30% increase, the cost to our board would be approximately $900,000 more in the 21-22 year. And that's why I believe that this decision is not only a bell time study decision, it is a budget decision trustees are making tonight a year out, because if we don't approve, then we will have to find just about $900,000 more based on that 30% budget increase that's happening across the province.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question. On the first page here, we noted that the shortages range, I guess, between the two boards, between 25 and 35 buses per day or routes per day. And then we've identified that ideally this would be, the new bell times would be giving us at least 40 buses or routes less than what we currently need. How long is this, has this all taken into like population, where our French immersion enrollment is going, where our new schools are going, where our capital projects are going? I assume we have, but I would just like to kind of get that extra clarity of, are we going to be doing another bell time study in 3-4 years because we're still not making enough? Or is there a way to kind of look, I know we don't have a crystal ball and we can't predict exactly, but this is going to be very, a huge change for a lot of families. And I'm just wondering at the longevity of, if we're approved and if we're enacting what we see coming out of the study, how much of a comfort zone will we be in with those decisions?
Thank you, Mr. Director.
So thank you, Trustee Miller, for those questions. I think it's important to note, this is the first time since I've been in the board, and that's me, that I recall a system-wide bell time study. What typically has been our practice, that there's been a bell time study in a little location, then a bell time study in these family schools, and you might save 1 or 2 buses. So about 2 years ago, when we said this problem is reoccurring, one thing that had to happen is our Transportation Consortium uploaded new updated software to make sure that all the routes and postal codes and all the data is accurate. 2, they have all our new boundaries. They're aware of our program strategies and where we provide yellow and black buses. So one thing that the transportation administrative team told governance committees, can we hold off a year because we need to update those exact parameters and have our software updated to make sure, and we deal with some of the sort of historical exceptions that we've made. An exception might be you're not eligible for transportation because you're under the distance, but you got an exception because your community didn't have a sidewalk. But 3 or 4 years ago, that sidewalk is now in place, so people might have been historically getting transportation that don't qualify. So all those exceptions were reviewed as well this year. So that's why, and I also want to thank Chair Johnstone, because she's been very strategic that both boards have to move along and both boards have to approve this, because if we approve our parameters, they're contingent on the Catholic Board approving their parameters, but otherwise we won't find the efficiencies. So I thank her for leadership in moving this jointly together with both boards. So I'm confident this is the right time to do this, make this decision, and that we've dealt with all those issues that you've identified.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Trustee Deeth, you've already spoken. Do you have a question for clarification?
Yeah, I'm still, I'm still wrestling with this start and end time. So to use an example to what I was talking about, was that, so I have a school that starts at 8:05 and finishes at 2:35. So what I'm saying is that if that school were to move to 9:30, then technically it would have to end at 4 o'clock, correct? Because it moves an hour and a half. So that's what I'm trying to understand, is if we can't do that, like, so that's what I'm saying, school's starting at 9:30, we're obviously doing a maximum end time is 3, so how are we so we would have to condense the day, is that correct?
I'll look to the director.
I will seek clarification. Since Stacy's not here, Associate Director, I will seek clarification. I can see where you're concerned based on that example, the secondary, I'm assuming it's a secondary school. I will seek that clarification. We spoke about those parameters, so I guess if a secondary school can't end later than 3, then they have to work backwards based on their schedule, their breaks, and find out, well, then what's the latest they could start. So your question is, is it even possible for a secondary school to start at 9:30 if the latest time is 3 o'clock? I will seek clarification from Stacy on that one parameter. But the greatest concern I know from both boards, and Chair Johnson can also add to this, they were very concerned that the secondary schools have very, I'll tell you, they're very concerned that the end times between schools didn't range that greatly because of coordinating sports. There were some drafts that came to us that the boards identified where there was a school ending at 2:15 and then one of them potentially ending at 3:45. And they said, that's 90-minute wait. How are we going to manage? If you schedule sports, that means either A, kids have to wait, or B, kids are going to miss the last period every day. So I will take that back, but I know where we were steadfast is that the end time for secondary had to be around that 3 o'clock sort of latest time. So I don't know if your question is, can they actually start at night? Would anyone actually be as late as 9:30? I will take that away with Stacy to see if there's a challenge with that number there.
Yeah, because it would have to be a shortened day, like it would have to be less.
Well, we
Maybe
can't.
they don't get lunch.
Yeah, through the chair, we have to give breaks, and we can't change the number of instructional minutes. The only thing I know that schools have, I know I have colleagues around here who've been principals in secondary schools, there is sort of a 4-period day, 5-period day, or how long the lunch period will be. Either some are 60 minutes and some are less than, and some are longer. So I think it's the lunchtime break that the people have some flexibility with. And I'm looking at our students here who are shaking their head as well.
Do you want to speak into your microphone? And Trustee Prozik, if you're helping clarify from the student perspective.
Yeah, for clarification, from a student perspective, between schools, generally the breaks between periods vary. So at my previous school, John A. Macdonald, we had a 10-minute break in between periods. At Bernie Custis, we start a little later than John A., and we only have 5-minute breaks between periods. So generally they vary on the breaks between periods, as well the lunch periods can vary. So they can be as long as 75 minutes or as little as about 40 to 45 minutes.
Thank you for that on-the-ground clarification. So that was for clarification. Are we okay?
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure if that's the case.
So Trustee Deeth, you've already been a first-time speaker. I'll let you finish your comment, okay. But it's going against the rules.
I just want to make sure, though, if that is happening and we're changing maybe breaks, in between classes from 10 minutes to 5 minutes to accommodate that crunch time, that we're aware of that. So I don't want surprises, right? So all of a sudden, if we are doing that, that's just my concern, right? Or parents having a surprise, so.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn to Trustee Johnstone.
So I'm going to use part of my time in terms of those questions, and the director can provide back once Executive Director Zucker returns to provide some more detail, but that was not part of the discussion in terms of changing break times or anything like that, and I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that being a concern that's now being floated out in the community, because that was not the intent. I think it's really important for folks to know that many of the bell times will not be changing. So I realize that you will find that out when the final report comes back, but many of those times will not be changing. This really was about how do you line up having multiple runs taking place between a high school and then the elementary schools, or reverse. So in terms of those questions, That was not direction that we had provided. So I want that clear. We did not provide direction to switch up the timetables of a school day. It really strictly was to, I guess, to your concerns, that whatever school you have in mind, it may be that they are not changing. So, so I want that noted. In terms of some of the other questions, a bell time study of this scale for the entire city has never been done before here in Hamilton. It has been done in other boards. So for example, in Kitchener-Waterloo, they completed a very similar study a few years ago. I think it was 5 years ago. And as a result, they effectively resolved their bus driver shortage and their funding. So both of those significant concerns were addressed, as well as other boards have also gone through this work. So there is a pathway that has already been trailblazed by other boards. We know that it's effective. That's why we're conducting it here and looking to do that. But I think that in terms of some of the time changes, many of the bells will remain the same. Some of them will be changing by 5 minutes in terms of a later start or an earlier start. And then there will be those where there is a greater jump between 30 to 60 minutes. But the discussion was not to tinker with individual school schedules. It was to determine how we could better line up the schools in order to support having buses service more than one school in a way that they can bring the students to school on time. That is the intent. And with that, just noting that we have so many students across our system right now that are not arriving on time. Some of the situations are extremely concerning. Students that are arriving over an hour late to school. They are missing first period and half a second period. When you think about what is important is that you need to have students, A, arriving to school on time so that they can get settled into the classroom together. B, the primary learning block is that first period. That is when they are primed to receive education and to receive instruction. And when they are missing it, if you've ever been in your schools, when a bus is arriving late is highly disruptive for those kids arriving late. Even if it's only, I say even if it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes is significant. You've missed O Canada, you've missed coming in together, settling in with your class together. It is an enormous disruption. And when we're thinking about our wider learning goals, we want to close those gaps in student achievement. That starts with getting our students to school in a safe manner. So I know that we all have those concerns, but the intent is to line up our bell times in such a way. Right now, our buses are already doing this. They're just doing it late. They're already servicing multiple schools, but because the bell times are so close, they're doing it so that our students are late. So this is just to spread out the times so that they can deliver everyone on time. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I do want to thank our chair, Trustee Johnstone, and the director for their work. This has been years in the works and a long time coming. So I appreciate that. Mr. Director, you look like you have something to add.
Just from an expectation, I think trustees, we were told to expect about half of the schools in both boards, just half will have some bell time changes. So I just want us to prepare for that.
The other half will remain. No.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. No further speakers. Trustee Mulholland?
That have had the bell times changed, will they be exempt or will they have their bell times changed again?
To the director?
So, through the chair. So the question: if schools have had their bell times changed in the last year or two through a small bell time study, could they potentially be changed? We asked them to be aware of those that have made changes already, but they are part of the mix, especially if if there are schools adjacent or close that didn't align bell times with especially our coterminous board. So they are part of the mix, but we did tell them to be aware that they might have gone through a change last year or two. So they are included.
Through the chair. So Hillcrest had their deal changed, and it saved 1.5 buses. So you're saying it's possible that that bell time may change again for those children twice after 3 years?
So through the chair, it could be if that bell time will find another efficiency across the whole district. So all schools are being considered in this efficiency review.
Thank you, Trustee Buck.
Okay, so acknowledging that this is potentially a huge change for a good number of families across Hamilton, starting in September, they've made plans for childcare. They've arranged their lives around current time, start and end times for their children. How are we, how do I put this? So actually, I'll go to Kitchener-Waterloo. You said they had done a bell time study within recent history. Were we able to learn anything from them about how they mitigated those changes, how they coped with those changes for families?
To Trustee Johnston.
And then I'll turn to the director. But in speaking with a variety of boards across the province, actually at one of our most recent OPSPA regional meetings, so there is a variety of learnings from boards who have conducted similar work in terms of how they supported those changes. Part of it is to look at, you can look at it, extending or offering before and after school care. There is possibilities, it would depend on the needs that the communities identify, but there is ways to support the communities through transition. I can think of my own community, or I guess shared community, with Trustee Galindo, where with Shannon Kustashian opening, that was significant bell time difference between Belmore school community, where families had previously attended, and in order to support that transition, there was different, I guess, look at how we supported bus stops at licensed childcare centers in the town in order to ensure that families were able to have their children make it to school and have those services available. So there was different supports provided in that way, but it would be within each school community, those discussions would be had and concerns would be identified, and then we would look at as a system about how we can best support challenges where they are being identified.
Trustee Buck, anything further?
No, I think that adequately gets it. But I did want to say thank you to the work that the director and our chair have done alongside the Catholic Board. It hasn't been easy fielding calls just from the West Mountain. It's recurring. It's not daily at this point. I think people have kind of accepted that this is where we've landed for this school year. And it's a little bit sad, actually, that we're not getting as many phone calls because it's almost like they've given up hope. So hopefully this is that extra encouragement for them that we're going to be able to provide actual solutions moving forward. So thank you for the work that you've done.
No, so I'm not going to have second-time speakers. Sorry, if there's a point of clarification, you could ask. Go ahead. Trustee Miller.
Sorry to jump in. I apologize. I know that we mentioned, this is just the point I wanted to be clarified, that it's expected to be completed in January 2020, correct? Is that when we're going to see the full report, or that's just something I missed? So if I could get that detail.
Trustee Johnston, or Chair Johnston?
So the consulting firm is conducting the work through the month of January, so we expect to be able to communicate either sometime it will likely be beginning to mid-February, just in terms of, could be earlier, but that would be an anticipated end date would be the beginning to mid-February.
Director Figueiredo?
So just to be clear, we discussed, Trustee Johnston's correct with those timelines, but to be clear, there's not a full report coming to the board around each school and then approving each school's bell time. Our commitment then is that we inform communities by mid-February, because what I learned from Waterloo is that when you inform them early, like in February, sometimes we do bell time studies where we are informing families in May and June, which is not enough time for families to make changes if they need to. But we would communicate to trustees their specific schools and to all members of exec council before it was made public, so you're aware of the current times and if there's any changes. So then if people do call, you're aware of it ahead of it going public. But our commitment is for it to go public by mid-February.
Sorry, thank you for that. I knew we were not going to be getting a full hash out or approving of each individual school, but I just wanted to know when we would be armed with information. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to a vote. All those in favor of approving the report? That is trustees Archer, Bingham, Miller, Pakin-Miller, Danko, Johnstone, Tutt, Buck, student trustee Prozik, student trustee Meddy. All those opposed? Trustee Mulholland and trustee Deeth. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning on to item 13, appointment to trustee special committee, program committee. And I just need to find my. That's right. So we received trustee Miller expressed interest in this committee. So I would be asking trustees tonight to approve adding trustee Miller to the program committee. So with that, looking for someone to put forward the motion. So it'd be brought forward by trustee Danko, seconded by trustee Mulholland. And any speakers to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? I think it's unanimous. Okay, yes. Okay, approved, wonderful. With that, looking for a resolution to move into committee of the whole. Trustee Tutt, seconded by trustee Pakin-Miller. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. And we're back. We're missing Trustee Mulholland. He will join us shortly. We're going to move right into reports. Item 15, Vice Chair Danko.
Thank you. And through the chair, it's my pleasure to present the report of the private session of the Committee of the Whole held earlier this evening, that the Human Resources Committee report from November 26, 2019 be received.
Thank you, Trustee Danko, seconded by Trustee Tutt. Any questions to the report? Seeing none, all in favor. That is unanimous for those in the room, noting that Trustee Mulholland and Trustee Deeth and Student Trustee Medi are not with us at this point. Moving along to oral reports, 16A, City School Board Liaison Committee. The committee has not met since I last delivered a report. Therefore, I'm going to move on to item number B. Hamilton Wentworth Home and School Association, Trustee Danko.
Thank you. This committee also has not met since I last provided an update.
Moving along to item C, Hamilton Foundation for Student Success. Trustee Paikin-Miller, would you like to update us on the wonderful gala?
I sure would. Well, before we get into the gala, I just want to get into, through the chair, student support grants. A total of 279 grants totaling $52,220.50 have been approved by the foundation between October the 1st, 2019 and December the 12th, 2019. Requests are most significantly related to funding, clothing, outerwear, and footwear for students. And now the big news is the Hearts Gala, the wide open gala. Really fantastic evening. I'll start right there. And thank you to all who attended on December the 5th. Your generosity raised $48,660 for the Student Barrier Fund. Each year, the number of attendees increases, and we're so grateful to our donors for their continued support in helping students to reach their full potential. The evening displayed the fantastic talent of HWDSB students from Westmount and Glendale Secondary School through performances and musical talent to entertain our donors right into the audience, and it was fun and it was wonderful. Now, the call for nominations to Board of Directors. The foundation is currently seeking nominations for our Board of Directors, 3 community at-large seats, and 1 HWDSB staff seat. Individuals dedicated to helping HWDSB students thrive and reach their full potential consider applying by January the 9th, 2020. More information and the online nomination form are located on the foundation's website. And with that, I move the report, I guess. Do I? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Paikin-Miller, seconded by Trustee... Oh, I don't need a seconder. Never mind. Thank you, Trustee Paikin-Miller, for your report. Any questions or comments? Thank you so much. The gala I was not there to attend, but I certainly watched it via Twitter, and it looks like everyone had an enormous amount of fun. So with that, moving along to OPSPA report. OPSPA has not met since I last provided a report to this committee. I will note, though, that Public Education Symposium will be taking place at the end of January. I know a number of you are registered, myself included. If you haven't registered, you need to do that ASAP. You do that through our Trustee Liaison Officer, Heather Miller. Do book your hotel room ASAP, just because they sell out quick, and you want to be located in the hotel that we will be at. So that concludes my OPSPA report. Is there any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving along. Student Trustees report. Student Trustee Prozik.
Thank you, and through the chair. We've had multiple Senate meetings. Unfortunately, Student Trustee Medi couldn't make the rest of this meeting, so I'll be delivering the Student Trustees report alone. We've had multiple Senate meetings throughout the past few weeks. most of which are regarding our conference, take the lead. So we're just planning that out and ensuring that all the details are set in stone. And the day confirmed as of now is February 13th, and that's a Thursday. So we're very excited, and we continue to plan on that. As well, we had the Bullying Intervention and Prevention Committee review panel visit Student Senate. We had some amazing feedback, some amazing engagement from our student senators on how to collect student voice and how they can best listen to students. And so we had some amazing feedback with that. The Student Trustees Association is currently, once again, if you haven't yet read our e-learning report, I highly recommend doing so. Some very good stats in there regarding the e-learning survey and the students' opinion on e-learning. The Student Trustees Association is continuing to monitor the current education situation, and our upcoming conference in February is the Board Council Conference, so we're looking forward to that.
Thank you, Student Trustee Prozek. Any questions or comments? I'll just add that your communications are second to none at Osceola. So, and for those of you, that is our very own Cameron Prozek. So they're very professional and well done, and very timely and responsive. So with that, moving along to our director's report.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll be very quick this evening as we've been giving updates over the last initial board and last board meeting. Two items I'd like to highlight. One is you will see the director's annual report going public. There's a Ministry of Education requirement every year that the directors put out an annual report on the progress of the board improvement plan, as we call our board annual plan. 3 areas that the province has asked boards to continue to focus on, which actually aligns to our areas. One is around the focus on mathematics and improvement in that area. 2, it's around pathways, and we know this government is really wanting us to continue to focus on specialist high skills majors and also to ensure that apprenticeship skills and trades. And then the third focus is a continued focus on equity, not only the board's equity action plan, but also in terms of how boards are moving forward with diversity hiring to make sure that students see themselves reflected in the educators in front of them. And also you'll see also highlighted for us is around our first staff census as well, and more information will be coming to trustees in February under the Positive Culture and Wellbeing Report. Second thing I'd like to say is thank you to the collective board of trustees for your leadership this fall. It's been a busy fall, a challenging fall, but your leadership has been very welcomed by, I know, Exec Council and by our community. Because during times of great crisis, leadership does rise, and I appreciate you for your leadership in terms of how you've risen to the occasion to engage in difficult conversations. And we are going to be engaging in courageous conversations with our Safe Skills Review panel, but that's the courageous work of leadership, so thank you. I also, on behalf of Exec Council, we want to wish all of you a happy holidays, a happy Hanukkah. It starts December 22nd, and for those of you who celebrate Christmas, a great Merry Christmas with your families, and thank you.
Thank you, Director. Comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll move along to the chair's report. I'll keep this very short and sweet. I simply wish to wish all of you a very Merry Christmas, a happy Hanukkah, a happy Zorro Artisanalism celebration on December 26th, or it's a holy day. And with that, however you and your family and friends celebrate this time of year, I certainly hope that you find peace, joy, and happiness, and is certainly much deserved break. So with that, that concludes my chair's report. And actually, I think I'm gonna note one other thing, which is trustees tonight all received cards from Trustee Bingham, and I want to note many of the trustees around this table exchanged cards or hugs or well wishes this evening, but Trustee Bingham gave all of us seed money, as she called it, to donate to our favorite charity. And I thought that is absolutely what is at the heart and soul of all the celebrations, taking, I guess, at this time of year, which is to think of others and to look for ways to show our neighbors loving kindness and compassion. So thank you for that, Trustee Bingham, and thank you for everyone who exchanged well wishes this evening, whether physical or paper, however that came. So thank you. And with that, have a very happy new year. I look forward to seeing you in 2020. Motion to adjourn, Trustee Tutt, seconded by Trustee Bingham. All in favor? That is unanimous for those in the room.
Sweater.